If you clicked on this video, you are probably looking for some creative ideas or some new ideas, some fresh ideas for group projects for your online course. I want to welcome you to Group Projects Made Easy. We are now on group project number 3. The first group project was called Who Makes the Team, and it gave your students the opportunity to develop a deeper understanding of a concept or a skill. And then the second group project was called the Manual. It allowed your students to apply something that they have learned by teaching it to somebody else in the creation of a manual or an instruction book. Well, in this group project, your students are going to analyze and simulate. This one is a heavy hitter. They're going to get progressively more complex as I get to group project number 6. So let's get into group project number 3. But before we do, I want you to get a sheet of paper. You've seen my videos before. Sometimes you know I have you to do some work. And go ahead and get started and divide that piece of paper in half. And that's going to be your little handout. It's going to be your little graphic organizer as you go through this mini workshop / video. All right, so let's get started. Now, before we get into the project, I have to let you know that I have a free course for online faculty, and it's called the F.A.C.E method. It's a systematic approach that I have created that I think encompasses the 4 major skills or responsibilities of online faculty: facilitate, assess, communicate, empower. And I believe that if you master these 4 skills, that you will love teaching online and your students will love learning from you in the online space. So I will ask you to head on over to KellieAlston.com. You can actually do that right now, stop the video, and then come back and let's get into group project number 3. All right, so the team analysis and simulation project, it's going to serve 2 purposes, really. It's going to help your students develop a deeper understanding of a concept, and it's also going to provide practical application of a skill. So it's taking what I showed you in group project 1 and 2, and now they're going to do both with this project. All right, so get out that sheet of paper that I told you about that you're going to need, and I want you to write analysis on one side, and I want you to write simulation on the other side. Okay, and you're going to be taking notes on that sheet of paper. All right, so the analysis portion is the first part of this project, and it is where the deeper understanding occurs, because before they can apply the skill, they have to understand it. So let's look at the term analyze, and I also want us to look at the term analysis. So when we look at the term analyze, this is what I found in the Oxford Dictionary. Let's listen to this. Examine methodically and in detail the constitution or structure, typically for purposes of explanation and interpretation. So when we are analyzing, there's a method to the madness, right? And we're doing it in a detailed manner. Why? Because we're looking to explain something. We're looking to interpret something, right? Okay, so when we do an analysis, then what is taking place is a process as a method of studying. What are we studying? The nature of something, or of determining its essential features and their relations. So we could be looking at the features of something and how they connect, right? So for this first part of the project, you're going to be asking your students to examine. Now write this down. Examine a document, a process, a procedure, or even a performance, and use a set of criteria to determine its quality or to explain, interpret its features. So that's a mouthful. Let's break that down. So think about your course, okay? And because this can be applied to any discipline, and ask yourself, is there a document, a process, a procedure, or a performance that my students could analyze based on some criteria? The criteria could be established by a board within your field, by an association, by accreditation, by the federal government, just depending on what you teach. So be thinking about that. And on your paper, I want you to do this for me under analysis. Answer this question. Is there a process, procedure, or way of doing something that your students need to understand based on the learning outcomes or the objectives of this course? Now, I've been emphasizing to you in this series that everything that you do with adult learners must be purposeful. In some previous videos, I talked to you about adult learning theories. And what the research says is that adults want what they're learning to connect to something they already know, and they also want it to have a real world application. So they are not into busy work. Okay, I can say that myself. I abhor busy work. So you want to make sure that if you decide to do this project, that you can answer yes to this question. There is a process. There is a procedure. There's a way of doing something that my students need to understand. The other question that I want you to answer is there a certain type of document that your students need to know how to complete that aligns with the learning outcome or objective? So let's think about that. I'm just going to throw something off the top of my head. Let's say you teach a dance class, okay? You teach a dance class, and what's coming to mind for me is what is that? Dancing with the Stars. And so you know how on Dancing with the Stars, they feature, they focus on a particular type of dance. And the choreographer, the dancer that they're paired with, comes up with choreographs the dance. They practice all week, and then they perform for us. Now, I am not a dance expert, so I may watch them dance and I'm like, ooh, kudos, that was awesome. But then the judges begin to speak and they'll say, well, no, you were not light on your feet, or your posture wasn't right, or your arms weren't right. And I'm like, well, it looked good to me. That's because those judges have a set of criteria by which they're judging that dance. They know the elements of a quality salsa or whatever type of dance that they're doing. So think about that in terms of what you're teaching. It doesn't matter if it's a music course, if it's a science class, if it's a law course, a nursing course. Is there a procedure or a process or a way that things have to be done in your industry pertaining to your course that your students need to understand? Hope that helped. Okay. Now, there also may be a document in your industry that relates to the learning outcomes of your course that your students need to understand how to complete. Okay. And I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. So for this video, I'm going to give you the course example in parts. In the other videos, I gave it to you at the end, but for this one, I'm going to give it to you in parts. So here is a course example from my course. Now, I teach a course called Assessment and Evaluation in Young Children. Okay, and in this course, the students learn about something called the F.A.C.E. And I want to make sure I don't forget how to explain it to you, so I wrote it down on a card, a couple cards. So IDEA, which is federal legislation, mandates that professionals from multiple disciplines work cooperatively to design and provide supports to infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families. So if you saw the first project, Who Makes the Team, you know that I gave you an example from another course where they were focusing on the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan, or sometimes it's called a program, okay? Well, the F.A.C.E. is the Individualized Family Service Plan, okay? And as I said, it's for infants and toddlers. So it is a one-year plan that a multidisciplinary team creates. Okay, and when we say multidisciplinary, I'm talking about there may be an occupational therapist on the team, there might be a speech pathologist on the team, a special education teacher. So these professionals come together, might be a nurse, they come together to create a plan for a child that is an infant or toddler with a disability. And that team lays out the outcomes for that child, what they would like to achieve, the supports that are needed for that child to achieve those outcomes, how much support is needed, and where the support will be delivered. Okay. All right. So that gives you a little background on the F.A.C.E. just in case you're not education major. So I have my students to read the IFSP handbook. So I found a handbook years ago online, and I had that handbook uploaded, and they read this handbook, pages 1 through 23 of it, and they also read pages 302 and 303 of their textbook. And this gives them the foundation for understanding what an IFSP is and what it entails. Okay, so that's step 1. In step 2, they read a sample IFSP for a child named Daisy Duck, which of course is a fictitious child, and about her family as well as the changes and review the IFSPs. Okay, so I have them to learn about an IFSP, then I have them to read over a sample IFSP. Next, they answer questions. This is where the analysis part comes in. They answer questions, and in paragraph form, they respond to these questions. Okay, and I ask them to give specific examples from Daisy's IFSP, demonstrating their ability to analyze, their ability to evaluate as well. Okay, so those are the 3 steps that I have for the analysis. Now, I want you to think about these same steps for your course. What is it that your students would need to read to get background information and assign reading on the topic? And what is a sample that they could review? So let's say we're back to that dance course. Is there a performance of a dance that they could watch and then use a set of criteria to analyze that performance? Okay, maybe there's an experiment. I'm also thinking about in instructional design, we have various instructional design systems and ways by which an instructional intervention or training can be created. So if I were teaching an IDT course, I could have my students to look at a training that was developed based on a specific system and have them to analyze that training. Okay, so I hope that's gelling. All right, so here's a sample analysis question. According to page 302 in our textbook, how did the initial IFSP meet the 8 criteria? So they're looking at Daisy Duke's IFSP, okay, and they are determining how it met this 8 criteria that are lined out in our book or outlined in our book, right? Our textbook. So they're going to number their papers from 1 to 8, and they're going to look at each of them, and in paragraph form, they're going to give an example from Daisy's IFSP that demonstrates that criterion was met. But if it was not, they're going to simply state an example of this criterion could not be found. So visualize that with me. They have this document as a group, and they're, examining it, scrutinizing it, looking for these 8 criteria. This is just question number 1. So let me give you an example. One of the criterion says this, that there should be a statement of the child's present levels of physical, cognitive, communication, social, emotional, and adaptive development based on objective criteria. So the students are looking to see if there's a statement of Daisy Duke's present levels of physical, cognitive, communication, social, emotional, and adaptive development in this IFSP, this fake IFSP. Okay? Are you tracking with me? I hope so. Okay, so this is an example of a response. Because if you're like me and you like the visual thing helps you to understand better, I hope that this helps. So this is from a real group. I actually have their responses here. There are 4 students in this group. This is just from a group this past spring of 2020. And they responded, Daisy's IFSP does provide information about her present levels of performance in all the areas, developmental areas noted above. And then they list the domains. The information is contained on page 2 of the initial IFSP. And then they proceed, and I probably won't read all this to you, but they proceed to look at every single domain and explain and give an example of how it's covered for this IFSP. So let's just read a couple of sentences. They said Daisy's initial IFSP breaks down physical development into gross motor, fine motor, and health status. In the area of gross motor development, Daisy is noted to be walking independently, though she's not able to walk up and down stairs without assistance. Okay, so you see there, they are having to look at the criteria and state, using examples from the F.A.C.E IFSP, of whether or not it met the criteria. And they go through this for each domain. I left that note so I remember to tell you. Each domain, they look at it. Okay. All right. So here are some more sample questions. I don't want to put them on the screen, but that was just sample question number 1 where they're looking at this criteria. I also asked them, did a multidisciplinary team create the IFSP? Remember, I shared that background information with you about that requirement by legislation. So did a multidisciplinary team create the IFSP in collaboration with the family? If so, who were the members of the team? So they have to list that and write in complete sentences. Were interventions for Daisy implemented into her daily activities? Explain. So they have to look at the document and find that. And I'll share one more. What were the significant changes made in the first review dated July 1st, 2000? Okay? Or whatever date that you want to put. All right, so those are some examples of sample questions. So you're going to want to create questions that allow your students to analyze the document, the procedure, the process, or the performance. All right, now let's talk about the simulation process. They're going to be applying the skill. So now that they have a deeper understanding of what an IFSP is, because they have gone through one backwards and forwards, inside and out, let's see if they can do it themselves. Okay, so simulate, what do we mean by that? We're not talking about virtual reality in this case. That's probably what you probably thought about. Okay, so they're going to imitate the appearance or character of something. They're going to create a simulation, which means imitation or enactment as of something anticipated or in testing. This is my favorite part. The act or process of pretending, feigning. Okay, so they're going to be going through the process, the practice of pretending to be on an IFSP team and to be filling out this document. In your class, they're going to be what? Pretending to or creating a performance. Remember, we said they're either going to pretend, recreate something, or they can create their own. So thinking about that dance, if you're teaching a dance course, perhaps you're going to have this group come up with choreography based on those same criteria and standards of their own. Okay? All right. I love this project. Can you tell? Do I sound excited? All right. Part 2. Your students will imitate, reenact, or recreate the document, process, procedure, or performance that they analyze or create a new version of it based on the same criteria. Oh, I hadn't told you that part yet. Okay, so now you know that's what they're going to do, okay? Imitate, reenact, or recreate. Don't you just love this picture? The document, in my case is a document, the process, the procedure, or the performance that they already analyzed. Or you may say, no, I want you to create a new version of it. Okay? Now, my students aren't creating a new version of it. They're actually going to do the same process that they just reviewed or analyzed. Okay? All right. So get your sheet of paper out. And on this side, I was going to get the paper out again, but you know, I've already shown it to you. You're going to write, you have simulation written on there, right? So I want you to think about these 2 questions. How can your students imitate, reenact, or recreate the document, process, procedure, or performance virtually. Remember, this is for your online course. Now, of course, you can do this project face-to-face, but this series is about online projects. So if you were doing an experiment, how would you have them do that as a group? Would they record each step of the experiment, and each person in the group record a section, and then they edit the video and put it all together? If it was a dance group, would they get on Zoom and they practice, they make up the dance and then they record themselves doing the dance? How are you going to have them to imitate this process, this procedure, okay, this document? Then you're going to ask yourself or answer the question, would you prefer that they create their own version of the document, process, procedure, or performance? Okay. In my case, no, because I'm dealing with something that's federally legislated, that takes place in our schools and our preschools, with our children. And so I want them to learn exactly how to do it. I don't want them to create something new. But this is where you have to look at your course and what would apply for your course. All right, let's look at my course example. The IFSP, so you know all about that now. All right, so this second portion, this is what they're going to do. Provide 1 to 2 paragraphs of background information on the child and his or her family. So the same way that I gave them a sample IFSP or a fake IFSP and the child's name was Daisy Duke, they're going to come up with a fictitious child and they're going to write a fictitious background about this child. This paragraph should include the reason for the referral or the child's identified problem. You may also want to include any questions that were asked of the family to determine the family's strengths. The next step is that they're going to complete pages 1 through 10 of the IFSP. So I give them a blank IFSP, okay, that looks exactly like the fake IFSP, and they have to fill it out together as a group. So of course they're going to have, somebody in the group may be the occupational therapist, or somebody might say that they're the nurse, or somebody might be the special education teacher on the team. Okay, so they're going to list all of the members of the team and go through the whole document, and they have that sample to go by. Now, the last part is I asked them, what did you learn about the IFSP process as a result, that should say, of completing this task? Okay, so that is the second portion. Now take these 3 steps and think about your course and how you could come up with the instructions for the simulation process. Okay, this is where I want to share some student comments with you. So I asked my students, oh, here it is. I asked my students that question at the end, what they got from this assignment. And so this is the beauty of teaching college students online, because you have students with so many different backgrounds and so much experience. And you have the brand new, the traditional student who may just be 19, 20 years old. Then I have students that are in their 40s that are coming back to get a different degree, or they're changing careers. It's a beautiful thing. And so one of my students who already works in her district, she already works with the preschool special education unit, said this: although I have a lot of experience with reviewing IFSPs, I don't have a lot of experience in developing them. I've been present for reviews that have occurred during transition planning, but I've never been involved in developing one from the ground up. And then she goes on to talk about this process helped her to see the strengths and how it's more family oriented, how it's similar to an IEP, but it was more the outcomes were not just for the child, they're also for the family. And then I had another student who she already teaches for kindergarten and first grade. She loops up back and forth. And she said, I've learned that it truly takes a good team of professionals and parents working together to ensure the child's needs are met. And she goes on to talk about how this helped her to see, how important the parents' rights were. So this was a group of 4, and they gave these very detailed, they're like little mini paragraphs about what they got from the assignment. So you want to include that component in your project as well. All right, so what do I want you to do? What are your responsibilities? I shared these in the last project video, but just in case this is your first time watching a Who Makes the Team, a Group Projects Made Easy video, I'm going to go over them again. So what you want to do is create a training module, and I have a video called How to Prepare College Students for Group Work Online that I would encourage you to watch. If you click above, you should see the card for that video, and you can click on that video and watch it in just a moment. All right, next I want you to set up groups. You're either going to have them enroll in groups of their choice, or you're going to assign them groups. You're either going to have groups at a designated time. Say, for example, my university allows us to allot a specific time, which we call it a synchronous course, where students, just like if they were going on campus face-to-face, they actually come to class. They know that block of time is for them to be in class on a certain day of the week. So if you have that situation, then you want them to have their group time during that time, okay? Or you may have varying times, okay? Well, you may have a group that meets on Tuesdays at noon. Another group meets on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Another group meets on Thursdays at 3 o'clock. How do you know this? Because you gathered information from your students to find out what days of the week and what times are convenient for them, and you looked at all of it and you came up with the best options for group time, okay? So those are the ways that you can set up groups. Next, I want you to remember to address the issues and concerns that the group members have. So you are going to actually attend the live sessions when these groups are meeting. Now, if you have a synchronous class, that's no problem because you're already scheduled to be there. But if it's a class where the students are signing up for different times, again, I want to encourage you to at least be there at the very beginning for like the first 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, and how much time you have is up to your schedule. All right, then you want to contact students and make decisions that are best for all. Why do you need to contact students? In cases where there's some issues where maybe students are not attending, or maybe they are not submitting their work, because we know from our last two projects that they have to meet live. Okay, take it from me, you have more and more problems when your students are doing group projects where they never hear each other's voices, they never collaborate in that way, where it's just written collaboration is not as effective. So they must meet live. So you want to address any issues that are brought up to you. And where do these issues come from? You're going to have a reporter that's going to send you minutes. And if you click above, there's a card that's going to send you to the video about why the reporter is so important. And when the reporter sends you the minutes, if there are any questions or concerns that the group may have, you're going to respond to the reporter. And the reporter will relay that information to the group, unless, of course, you want to do it live when they have their next session. Woo, that was a lot, wasn't it? Okay, so now we're at the end. You've made it. You've been here with me 28 minutes. Now, Kellie, that's me, third person I'm talking, has 6 elements of group projects that I have found that are critical to a successful group work experience, okay? And we're going to go through these throughout this whole series. This is how we're going to end each video, each mini workshop. We're going to end it with these so I can show you how to ensure that you have these elements. Now, this project is a little different, so it's going to be some leeway we'll talk about. All right, so the first thing is choice. Adult learners need to be able to choose something, some part of their learning experience, okay? So you can offer them choice different ways for this project. Perhaps you allow them to sign up for their group. Of course, that will be the case if you don't have a synchronous scheduled time. So that's where they have some choice. They also are going to have choice in something we're going to talk about in a minute. And number 4 is group roles, where they get to volunteer for the role they want to play, the role they want to fulfill with the group. You could have them, maybe perhaps there are two types of performances. Back to the dance class. Maybe there you have a different, you have a list of different dances and that they can analyze, and they get to choose which dance they want to as a group that they want to analyze. or there's a type of procedure. If it's a nursing course or if it's some kind of science course, there's a type of way of doing certain things they have a different they have options to choose from as to which one they want to analyze. So you have to think about that. How could you provide choice? It's not as cut and dry as the two projects before, because this one is delving a little bit deeper. So that's something that you're going to have to figure out as it relates to how you want to give them choice, but you must give them choices. Okay. All right. Number 2, you want detailed instructions. And I gave you examples of that when I showed you the 1, 2, 3 about the F.A.C.E. And you want an assignment specific rubric, because when it's assignment specific, indicating specific components of the assignment, then it helps to provide what I'll call a kind of checklist for students to make sure that their assignment is of a high quality. All right. Also, they have to have, as I mentioned, weekly live sessions. We also want them to have group roles. So during these live sessions, they have decency and order, and everybody is responsible for something. So the group roles, I told you were going to have these memorized. It's the group leader, the timekeeper, the reporter, the publisher, and the reflector. Those are the 5 roles that your students will need. If you click the card above, it will send you to a video where I explain the group roles in detail. The project roles, I can't tell you the project roles specifically for this particular one because it depends on your discipline. So if your students are going to be, let's say, recording a video of some sort, you're going to want to have a role perhaps that's called the editor, the person that's going to put the video together and do all the editing. So the roles that are going to be created are going to be based on whether they're doing a document, they're doing a procedure, a process, a performance. You're going to have to come up with roles as to how they put that together, or you can have them to come up with the roles as well. Okay. All right. The next component that you want to make sure that you have is planning spreadsheets. So when your students meet live, they should have a planning sheet that says, okay, this is what we are planning for that's going to be due next week. And they need to have that specifically in writing, okay? And it needs to be uploaded to the file exchange or wherever you have on the group page where documents can be seen by all. And last but not least, they need to have weekly deadlines, and that's what these planning sheets are for. Always have components of the project due before the live session so that group members can pull up and utilize and examine their classmates' contributions, even if they, for some reason, don't show up. Never have documents or parts of the project due on the day that they meet live. They need to be due before that. So I want to emphasize that. Okay, because they come to me and they say, okay, well, Kellie was supposed to do so and so and so, and Kellie's not there. So where does that leave the group? Do they have somebody else to do it? Do they keep trying to email Kellie? What do they do? Okay, so that's why I've learned this from over the years. Have the project's parts due before they have their live sessions. All right, so if you made it to the end, that's 33 minutes. I am so grateful to you, and I hope that this was a project that you are excited about, that you can adapt and modify for your course. Now, if you're still here, there's nothing else to do but to subscribe and click the bell and then click all. YouTube gives us so many choices. So click all so that you'll be notified when my next mini workshop/video comes out. I would love for you to give it a thumbs up if you were blessed by it. And leave a comment or post a question. I love interacting with you. And last but not least, share it with a colleague who might be looking for a really in-depth project that's going to take your students 3 to 4 weeks to complete. If you have not watched the whole series, go back to my playlist and watch the whole series. And until the next video, I want you to continue to create dynamic learning communities online. Bye-bye.